Hey, everybody, welcome to the Wednesday Justin and Jay Live. We're so excited to have you guys on. Today, we're going to be talking about leading yourself and the area of credibility. We've been going over a series on 6 keys to personal effectiveness in your leadership. Last week, we had a great talk about emotional intelligence. Today, credibility. And it should be an amazing talk today. So, Jay, why don't we jump into it and just share a little bit about in your opinion, why credibility is such an important part of leading yourself?
Good. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for anyone joining us here. And hope you'll find this useful. As we talk about leader domain, there's 2 leader domains that people operate in that are essential. One is, obvious. Everybody says, well, I need to lead other people. I have a team. I have a group of people I need to leader people. But what's found is that leaders of people have to first lead themselves. Or you'll hear this statement lots of times, hey, everybody can be a leader. Well, that's true in one sense, in that we can each lead ourselves. Not everybody is cut out to or wired to lead other people. And we can get into that in later sessions. We can talk about that distinctive. So when we talk about leaders and how we apply things and how we put it into practice, there's these 2 domains that we do it in. One is being leader of self, which leads to the ability for us to lead others out of who we are and what we're about. And so in that, when we think of leader of self, we're thinking about the idea that how do we consistently, and if you were with us last week, we talked about this idea of consistently getting the right things done and doing it with excellence and with others. And so that's the stuff of leading self. If you want to jam it into one sentence or one concise statement, consistently getting the right things done with excellence and with others. And if you were to boil it down even to just one single term or word, it would be effectiveness. And so that's where we give this context to it. And that's why we're focusing on these 6 key areas that really contribute to our effectiveness. And last time we were together, we talked about emotional intelligence being so essential. And as Justin was describing these 6 areas, so we started with emotional intelligence, and the second one we're moving in today is credibility. And credibility is so essential because if you think about it, it's hard for you to get the right things done with excellence and with others if people don't believe what you have to say. They don't trust you, they don't respect you, they don't believe in you. In fact, I remember the statement years ago I saw that caught my attention was to be heard, you have to be believed. And so credibility has, now there's some good works out there, Kouzes and Posner, who wrote the Leadership Challenge, a kind of a classic piece on leadership, wrote a book one time on credibility. That's quite, so if somebody wants to go deep, pick up that work or find a book summary on credibility by them. But we're going to summarize some things today, and we're going to wrap it into 3 key areas. But the importance of credibility is you got to be believed, you got to be respected, you got to be trusted, to be heard, to be able to have influence, which is one of the first places we'll start. Anything else before we launch into kind of 3 areas of credibility?
No, I think that's good. And I'm excited because we are bringing on, our team is growing. If you're listening and you don't know, we run a nonprofit that works with orphans in Ukraine for about 5 years now. And it was just me and my wife, kind of chief cook, bottle washer, like they say, starting the organization. And now all of a sudden it's just growing. We have team we're building. We have about 7 people on our marketing team. We just hired our second full-time staff who we're onboarding this week. And so all of a sudden you start to get like, oh my gosh, now there's actually real people who I need to lead and get tasks done and trust me and believe me. And yeah, I just think, especially as you bring new people on, I'm excited as we bring this staff member on, how do you maintain and build credibility so that I agree, it's that trust culture that builds culture that builds a lot. So yeah, coach me here as we grow here. How do we keep credibility going? What are practical ways that we do that?
like I said earlier, there's quite a bit written on this and the importance of it. But we're going to focus in 3 areas here. One is the idea, if you're a devotee, a disciple of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll recognize the circle of influence that shows up in habit 1. Okay. And I've tended to expand that a little bit to call it a sphere, because I don't think it's just a 2-dimensional circle. A sphere of influence and responsibility. Not only do you have influence, but you have responsibilities you have. And you'll see as you carry out your responsibilities, you actually gain credibility. And then the idea of influence. So we're going to explore it in this idea of a sphere of influence and responsibility. We're going to explore it also, this idea in that is trust. In the middle of credibility is the stuff of trust at the core. And in that is made up of character and competence. Okay. So the sphere of influence, responsibility, we're going to look at character and competence. Because credibility is around, are you trustworthy? What do you bring to the table that people can trust you and gives you credibility? And then the third area we're going to find out is respect. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but most of your influence comes out of how another person perceives your respect for them. And so we're gonna explore that a little bit. Okay, makes sense? Those 3.
Say those 3 one more time.
Sure. The first area is going to be, we're going to explore a sphere of influence and responsibility. How does that play into credibility? The second is going to be character and competence, which are the 2 main ingredients to being found trustworthy. Because that's the underlying thing in credibility. Are you trustworthy? Can I put my trust in you? Okay. And it's made up of character and competence. And we'll see the play of the 2, because normally we think it as 1-dimensional. It's 2-dimensional. And then the third area is the idea of respect.
Great.
And you're going to find out as we talk through it, most of your influence comes through how a person perceives your respect for them.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Let's
ready?
Hit it. I'm
launching them. Okay. So in that first area, sphere of influence and responsibility, is the idea that many people are operating outside. Well, here's what they try to do. You'll hear it in the statements, well, I want to control that, or this is beyond my control, or something like that, or I don't like what's going on because it's beyond my control. First of all, we got to determine and understand that control is a very, very small thing. Most people, in fact, my wife, who you know as your mother-in-law, will grind her teeth sometimes, grind her teeth and go, Jay, because I'll use this statement. Control is just an illusion. Most people are trying to control things they have no control over. And when we think about control, I think
we all learned that in 2020.
Yes, yeah, that's a good illustration of that. There's so much beyond our control. In fact, when you look at control, if you talk about a circle of control, like a circle of influence, really a circle of control is like a dot in the middle of the circle of influence. And that is, we really can't control anything outside of ourselves, our responses, our attitudes, our behaviors, our choices. Okay, so when we talk about control, the first thing to understand, it's a very small circle, okay, of control. But outside of that is this thing called a sphere or circle of influence. Things you have influence over, things that you can speak into, that you can make a difference with, that you can impact, and so on. So you have to discover, what is that? What is my sphere of influence and responsibility? And many times even just drawing that circle on a page of paper and saying what's inside and what's outside of that, and understanding that. And if you report to somebody, you have a manager, a director, somebody you report to, is actually sharing that with them and say, I think these are the things within my influence. These are the things outside of them. It's almost like project scope. Here's what's in the project. Here's what's outside the scope project. And it makes a big difference when you understand the scope of a project. Same thing's true for influence. And when you and your manager or director agree, yep, these are the things within your influence, things you can impact or impact you, that sphere of influence, your effectiveness goes way up. Because most people's ineffectiveness is because they're trying to control or influence things outside of that sphere. they're working on, they're worried about, they're trying to control, they're raising issues about things they have no influence over. And people see them as ineffective. Why should they be concerned about that? Why are they spending so much time trying to change something they have no influence over? And so
Also,
one of
I
the first
think that's
things,
good.
go ahead.
Sorry, I think that's good because it's also when you're trying to control things outside your influence, it's also emotionally exhausting.
It is.
And I found when you get emotionally exhausted, you lose complete focus, energy for the things you can change.
That's right.
So
Very
then
good point.
instead of focusing your time, your energy, your efforts on what you can change, you're worried about either external or internal or, way broad, like world issues or even company issues or department issues that you can't control, causing you to get frustrated, anxious, stressed. So then you can't actually do anything because you're already spent all of it on stuff you can't control.
So highly effective people recognize the things beyond their control. What do they have influence over, and what can they adapt to? The ability to adapt. Many people get in trouble because they're trying to influence or control things they have no control over, and they become frustrated. There's, like you said, spending a lot of time, energy, focus on those things and wearing themselves out. In fact, you raise a good point. It's a great diagnostic. And that is, if I'm feeling tired, worn out, and it's not because I'm staying up late and watching the late movies or things like that, or surfing the net or things like that, but pretty normal, as it were, in my life going through, then is it possible that I'm putting energy and time and focus into on my control?
It's great. It's so good.
Yeah. And so as people view you, also observe you, they notice whether you are operating within your sphere of influence and responsibility or outside of it. And if you're outside of it, most of the time they'll conclude you're fairly ineffective because you're not putting your attention and energy and resources on the things you can impact. So, so that's that first with credibility. And there's a lot more you could go into in this, but we'll just encapsulate that real quickly here. So let's move on to the second area, unless you have anything else.
Great.
Sphere of
No, I think that's great. Let's keep going.
Okay. So the second area is the idea of character and competence, because where your credibility lies, and you could use the words being trustworthy, or even, again, credibility, the two key components to that is your character and your competence. And now a lot of people will see the stuff of character. Oh, he's a nice person. She's a nice person. They just are so generous. They're so respectful. They're so kind. They're compassionate. They see them of a person of noble character. And that's a good thing. That's important. But there's this other area of competence. That is knowledge, skill, experience in an area. So if you have a job, an assignment, something that you're supposed to deliver on, and you are not capable of doing it, or you do not deliver results in that, you may be very capable, but you don't deliver, or vice versa, you deliver and it's not high quality because you don't have good skill and so on, trust will go down. You could be the nicest person in the world, but if you're not capable and you can't deliver results, your trust goes down. And the same is true vice versa. You can have a very capable, a person very strong in delivering results, but if they're thought of as a weasel, that their character is suspect, trust will go down. So your credibility rests in these two dimensions of who you are, and your character and your competence. Okay, so one of the things you want to look at to grow your credibility is to grow noble character and strong competence, experience, skill, knowledge in your areas of expertise, and becoming stronger there. And then your credibility goes up when both of them, but it requires both. A lot of people will focus on one or the other. You got to focus on both. And it's the intersection of the two that promotes trustworthiness, or the stuff that contributes to credibility.
I think that's good, and I do think you're right. We get stuck in one of the two. We either like, hey, I'm gonna be the best I am at this thing, at the expense of our character, or we're like, I'm a great person, and so therefore we kind of neglect the skill. And I like what you said. What hits me as we've talked about emotional intelligence, we've talked about credibility. So much of being a great leader seems to be that you're a healthy person.
You raise a great point.
You're healthy internally, externally. You're taking care of your mind, your heart, your spirit, your life, and therefore you can lead others well. You have character, you have emotional intelligence, you're credible, you have you're working on your skills, and it makes sense if you think about it, because if, like you said, if you can't lead yourself well, how can you lead another? First you lead yourself, then you can lead another, then you can lead a group, then a team, then a business, then whatever. But I think it's something we neglect because it's not glamorous, and it's harder to work on ourselves. So we move outward first instead of internal, instead of doing the hard work to become great inside, and then naturally it'll flow outside, I think.
Great. Yeah. Many times we describe leader development as an inside-out process, developing an outward mindset, because now what we're doing is for the sake of others. So it's an inside-out process rather than just something on the surface. And people see through so quickly people that are what they call phony or inauthentic, because they're trying to lead others. Because when you think about it, if you want to lead a really healthy, vibrant team, you want each person on the team to be highly effective. So you want to invite them to grow in these 6 areas.
That's great.
Okay.
I'd like to get to the last one, respect, because I think this is a big one, and you've already taught me a few things about this before we run out of time.
Sure. Yeah.
Was there another one, or did I jump ahead?
No,
that was
you're
it, right?
correct.
The next...
You're correct.
Okay.
The third one, we've been through the sphere of influence and responsibility. We've talked about character and competence that contributes to us being a trustworthy person, necessary for credibility. And the third area is our ability to treat others and to relate with others with great respect. And many people would wonder, well, why is this in credibility? I mean, that's just, again, a good character quality. But and that's true. But in the idea of credibility, if you stop and think about it, and if any of you have been around the written work called Leadership and Self-Deception, you can go to page 29, and it'll talk about this concept there. But the idea is that most of your influence, and this has come out of some studies that are, again, counterintuitive, but the studies they found out was most of your influence, even if you had these other areas going well with influence and the stuff of trust and competency and so on, is that most of your influence comes from how the other person perceives your regard for them. That seems a little convoluted, but it's rich in this. Most of your influence, they found, comes from the other person's perception of your regard for them. In other words, do you see them, that individual, as a person or as an object? And what we mean by that is an object is someone, when we treat a person as an object, there's someone that can just help us accomplish what we want to accomplish. They're there for us to use for our purposes. The other aspect of an object would be that person just gets in the way, and so we treat them poorly because we just see them as getting in the way of what we want to accomplish. The third area is we may just see them as insignificant or irrelevant, and so we end up treating them with indifference, which in some ways is the worst thing. And people have described what's worse than love is indifference or hate. Yep. In the sphere of a loving relationship, what's worse than hate is indifference. And so unfortunately, that happens many times in our relationships in the working environment, on teams and things like that, is we begin to treat people with indifference. We don't see them as relevant or significant at all. And so in that, they perceive your respect for them has gone down. And when that starts happening, our credibility, our influence goes down too. And so one of the first things we can do is begin to understand who that person is. If we're devoted followers of Jesus, we see them as a person, what we call an image bearer, that they've been created in the image of God, and the importance and value of who that person is, that God deeply loves, and we're learning to love and appreciate also. But another way you can see it, described is, do we understand or see that person as a human being and not as a human doing? And that's, again, if we're treating them as a human doing, just there for their function and what they can contribute, and not who they are as a person, we begin to treat them less respectfully. And in that process, they pick up on that, and our influence goes down. Any of this making sense?
Yeah, it's so good. And it does, the one story that comes to mind that you helped me with in this, and it's counterintuitive. A while ago, we had brought a new team member on, and we had an issue where they had said something in a disrespectful way. And I was all upset. And I was like, in my first response is like, I'm the boss, man. You ain't going to talk to me like that. Like, what are you thinking? I'm the boss. What? And like, and it was so like, and I asked you, I think I was like, how do you deal with this? Do I confront them? Because a lot of bosses do that. You have that sit across the desk from me, and I'm going to confront you on your behavior of you need to respect me and blah, blah, blah. And my first response was that, but then you said, well, you earn respect. You respect them, like you just said, you respect them, and then they'll respect you. And I actually brought this up in a few of our other lives about the conflict management type thing. But we instead I said, okay. And we talked about, so let's sit and talk. Why did they do that? And we've never ever had a problem again. And he totally, respects me, and I respect him, and it's awesome. But I feel like if I would have responded that way, it would have actually done the opposite of what I wanted it to.
Yeah, good.
It
would great that you're alert to that. Yeah, and we do a great checkpoint or diagnostic is: am I leading out of a position and a title, or am I leading out of who I am as a person and the overflow of who I am? This inside-out process that we've talked about. And our ability there with respect and credibility and these things, do I lead out of those things? And do I have to give attention to those? Because anytime we're bumping into something, the first place to look is inward. What is it I'm doing that's contributing to this issue, to this problem, and addressing that? And then moving on. It's not always just about us, but it's the place to start. Because if we aren't there, who we are and what we're doing is going to mess up any other solution or remedy that we're working on.
Well, and the famous quote from John Maxwell is everything rises and falls on leadership. And that is so true. If there's an issue of disrespect or anything, it usually does start with the leader. And we always want to blame outward, but again, it's usually comes inward to it. So I think, thanks, Jay. That's so good. And everybody listening, thanks for listening. And so I didn't do this at the beginning. I should have, but I'm Justin, and we call ourselves Justin and Jay, the tried and true, and the charismatic creative. So I'm a charismatic creative entrepreneur, lots of starting things and creative stuff. And Jay is the steady, tried and true. And so we're coming together to help each other in leadership, but to help you in leadership. And if you like what we're doing, like and subscribe to this page, this post. You can like it and comment. We'd love to hear from you. Also, Jay has written a awesome leadership journal that a lot of people are starting to get now, and we're getting good feedback. And to get that journal, it's a week-by-week journal for 14 weeks. You can go to justinandjay.com/journal. justinandjay.com/journal. And again, we'll be on here next week at it's 9 p.m. Ukraine time, and what is it, 1 p.m. Central?
It is 1 p.m. Central.
All right. Still 1 p.m. All right. So nice. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Jay, for sharing your wisdom, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks for joining us. Bye now.